episode 115 of Below the Belt. Kind of a bit special today. As everybody listening at home will know, it's coming home. But I'm joined by two Italians today. Two people from the boot. Our friend Paul Zanon is pretty much a regular now. And Luca Rossi. How are you, sir?
Very good, thanks, Callum. Absolute pleasure to be here on the show on such a, incredible week, really. England in a final since '66. So, wow, yeah, very excited, obviously, as you said. Italian parents like Paul. So, for us, it has an extra special significance.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said, saying Luca Rossi, it just makes me want to say Luca Brazzi every single time. Like it took me absolutely everything to not say Luca Brazzi, because that'd just be what an introduction that'd be. That's for my Godfather heads out there. That's for my Godfather heads out there. I've watched those films more times than I can remember. So let's talk. I don't mind this. Let's talk 5 minutes about the Euros. I literally come off a podcast talking about the Euros, and I just said on this other podcast, The Fighting Cock, which a lot of our listeners will know of. I think it's fair to say the two best teams are in the final. I think that's fair. Paul, what do you think?
If I'm going to be deadly honest, I thought Spain played better the other night. They had more possession, they had more sort of chances to score goals. But Italy stuck to a game plan, which was standing firm. And I think they realised that every time they were going on the break, they were getting countered. The Spanish were too strong, they were fitter. So they used strategy. And one good thing that the Italians have always had is a very stalwart defence. And played well. Chiellini was fantastic. Di Lorenzo was great. And it all came down to the penalties. I mean, statistically, Italy have done a lot worse than Spain have in their last sort of 4 or 5, but we pulled it out. And you got to give, the last penalty from Italy is probably the coolest penalty I think I've ever seen being taken. He literally p-rolled it over the line. So, but it all adds to the intrigue, and in a tournament of any sort, it always raises the game of the individual, the team, the fans, etc. And you never know what to expect. So here we are now, England against Italy on Sunday, and can't wait, really can't.
What about you, Luca? You've enjoyed it? Enjoyed the Euros?
Yeah, I think it's been a tremendous tournament. I agree with Paul. I think Spain dominated. I was a little bit concerned about Italy. There was a bit of a dip physically, I felt, so they were struggling a little bit. So I actually think it's good for England to have Italy in the final rather than Spain. I actually think Spain would probably have been a tougher final, actually, dare I say it. Finals might not, it's not black and white. They don't always work out that way, but I did notice a marked dip in Italy's form against Spain, which is a little bit concerning, but hopefully they'll be rested come Sunday. And, as Paul said, one thing about Italy as well, they're used to the big game occasions. They won't crumble under pressure. So, if England win it, they'll deserve it.
Yeah, I think that's the great leveler really with this final, is that I think England have got probably the better side in terms of individual players, especially attacking players. Like you've got Harry Kane, Raheem Sterling, Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, who's barely got a look in but has had a brilliant season. But Italy have been there and done it before, and I think it's when in football, football particularly, it's being used to winning, having a history of winning is so important. And I know that as a Spurs fan that yes, because Spurs don't have that history of winning, it's hard to get over that line for the first time in such a long time. Yes. But I'm really looking forward to it. Who do we fancy?
Paul, you go first.
Yeah, well batted, Luke. Okay, so if I had to put money on it, I would favour Italy, but not by a landslide, by any sort of margin at all. You look at the way that England performed last night versus the way that Italy did the other night. If you put those two respective teams together, you'd probably edge England. So, but I think overall in the tournament and the way that Italy can adapt as well, I'm going to give it to Italy. But I think we're only looking at a team winning by a goal here, so probably like a 2-1 margin or somewhere around that sort of mark. I think it's going to be a really intriguing game, because I think we're going to see something from both teams that we haven't seen yet in terms of attacking. And it's good that we've got the whole sort of 5 substitute thing on as well, because that really can change the dynamic of a game, and it has so far in the tournament, as we've seen. So let's see. I've got to say quickly, I've after you made your comment last night of choose a side, I have had people on Twitter asking me, who are you going for? So here's the answer. My first World Cup that I really remember was 1982, and that was an epic one where Italy won the first. They had 3 games, so there we go. Luca's showing us a 1982 piece of memorabilia to the screen. Wow. Beautiful. España 82 World Cup.
Completed album. If anyone wants to put in an offer, it's a completed album, 1982. Pretty good condition as well.
It's yours for £20,000 plus postage. It's yours. But that particular World Cup, the first 3 games, Italy literally scraped through with draws, 3 draws. And the next round, they were up against Argentina and Brazil. And that was 2 very good teams, not just for who they were, but who was in the teams. You had a 21-year-old Maradona for Argentina. And Brazil was the likes of Junior, Socrates, Falcao, Zico. And Italy smashed them both, then went on to beat Poland, and then obviously West Germany in the final. So I'll always remember that. And as a result, my allegiance in terms of Italy has been there going forward, and through good and bad. And, that also means that I'll support Italy when we're in the rugby, which means that we always get smashed. But in the same breath, I always wear the England shirt when England are playing as well. So I just didn't envisage, at the beginning, people were saying there's a possibility of the 2-16 sets of teams that Italy might meet England. And I thought, no. And I was thinking, I hope not, actually, because that's going to be difficult. But here we are in this position. So here I am answering the question as honestly as possible. And I hope the best team really does win, who deserves it the most. But I'll be wearing the blue shirt, the Azzurri, come Sunday.
Yeah. That's I understand that, and I think I speak for everybody at home when I say you're a fucking disgrace. But it's going to be good. It's going to be a really good game. I'm looking forward to it. I am a bit actually confident that England are going to win. I just think they're the best team in the competition. Strangely, they never are, but I actually think they are this time around. But yeah, looking forward to it. It's going to be really good. It's going to be a shame when it's over and I have to go back to watching Spurs. But it is what it is. Luca, so it's your first time on.
Yeah.
I think we've met once. I think
so. At the Peacock Gym, I do believe, in 2019. Yeah.
And that was when. Yes, I remember that. And I remember. Yes, that was really, really good. I remember that. And Jimmy Tibbs was kind of holding. He was holding court, wasn't he?
He was. Yeah.
He told the story about taking Naz on the pads, and that's one of my. Yeah, I'd not met Jimmy before, and but that was good fun. And for those of you who haven't heard this story that Jimmy Tibbs told, he was talking about taking Naz on the pads, and he said, no matter what, and I take someone on the pads, I'll break them every single time. Break 'em. Paul does the voice much better than me, and he said. He was taking Naz on the pads, and Naz, Prince Nassim was kind of famous for being a featherweight that punched like a middleweight. That was always the line that was used about him. And he said that Naz was hitting the pads and he could feel the shots through the pads. But he was like, I'm not letting him break me. I am going to break him. And he would say, all throughout it, he kept saying, and correct me if I'm butchering this, Paul, he said, I thought you was a puncher, Naz. I thought you was a puncher. And he's hitting, and he is going in 2 rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds, 5 rounds, 6 rounds, and every round Jimmy's saying to him, I thought you was a puncher, Naz. I thought you had some pop. Everyone says you punch like a middleweight. Come on. I think it got to round 13, and Jimmy said, I'm starting to go now. Like, I am starting to wilt a bit. I'm starting to go. And I was just about to give up, and then Naz said, no more, Jimmy. That's me for the day. That's me done. And he finally broke Naz in the end. It's just Jimmy tells it much better than me. He tells the story much better than me. He's just got that voice, and obviously he was there as well. But it was just such a great story and such a good time to listen to him. So Luca, what was your earliest kind of memories of boxing?
Yeah, so my dad was like a big boxing fan. He came over to London like in 1948, actually went to the first Olympics in London as like a 16, 17-year-old. And he was like a massive Rocky Marciano fan. So basically he'd tell me stories of, back in those days to get a result of a fight like that. It's not like now where you've got instant news. You had to sort of get the news the day after. And he would tell me about him going to Holborn at the Daily Mirror's printing press to kind of get the latest, the first edition as soon as he could. He was like absolutely nuts about Marciano. And then he'd go to see all the Italian Americans, the likes of Joe Giardel or Willie Pastrano, who fought like Terry Downs, all those big, great Italian Americans who came to London. So he'd go everywhere to see absolute nutty boxing fan, my dad. So, and he actually did a bit of boxing, introduced me to Alec Buxton once as well. And Alec Buxton was one of three brothers, I believe. There was an article in Boxing News not that long ago. So that's really how it all started. But my first memories probably Paul would relate to this. Probably Ali Holmes around 78, 79, when we're just seeing Ali wearing those sunglasses and having taken a complete pasting, really. And he was at the real back end of his career. And then the likes of Jim Watt, Charlie Nash. I remember that fight bizarrely. This is probably about 81, and then from then on, you name it, I've got, I can recall them all pretty much. So those were probably my earliest memories of one. Obviously, World of Sport, Dickie Davis, and watching the likes of Kirkland Lang, God rest his soul, who just passed away recently as well. I remember watching a fight of his against Sylvester Mitty on World of Sport and being completely blown away really by this incredible talent. So what a sad end, really. Rest in peace, Kirk.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just have to say, you two look far too good to have seen fucking Ali Holmes, like to have been alive and around. To are far too young looking to have seen Ali Holmes.
It's the olive oil.
I know, right?
Good enough for Popeye, good enough for us as well, So
yeah. I know. I think I think one of my earliest memories was Tyson Buster Douglas. But you guys are talking about Ali Holmes, Jesus.
Yeah. My first memory was actually Ali Spinks. I remember Muhammad Ali losing against Spinks, and having grown up as a little kid, I just remember my dad talking about this fearsome figure of George Foreman and how Muhammad Ali had beat him. I don't remember that fight, but I do remember when Spinks beat Ali, and probably sort of shedding a tear at the time as like a 5-year-old kid. But and my dad had met Sonny Liston, so there's always that story that was floating around the house as well. But yeah, no, as Luke was saying, when Ali's career was finished off, it was kind of a bit of a sad moment. And then Holmes became the torchbearer for the division for many years and almost broke Rocky Marciano's record if it wasn't for their brother Michael Spinks who came along. So not so much a golden era, just a bloody great bunch of fighters who were succeeded by more bloody good fighters, and that's it. Where we seem to have had quite a few lulls and vacuums after that, and then also the introduction of the the various alphabet soup titles, and that's it. But good old sport boxing, not bad.
Yeah, it's interesting that whole Rocky Marciano record, I'm doing the air quotes, people, because obviously Julio Cesar Chavez Sr. Went well past it, although he probably fought more puddings than Marciano did. He fought a lot of muck. But it's interesting that and it became known to me in my early years of following boxing as like the Rocky Marciano curse, because fighters would get close to that 49-0 mark and then lose. Larry Holmes is a good example. Another example was a little bit more niche, was Chris John. I think Chris John got to about 46. And then he lost, and it was just one of those things. And I remember being really nervous when Mayweather fought Andre Berto, because I thought, oh God, just imagine it. Just imagine the curse strikes again. And I remember when Chris John lost, and everyone's saying the curse is real. If
I'd have interviewed Mayweather for Boxing Monthly, he'd have lost. I had a stretch. Look, I remember this. I went through for a role where I think something like out of 10 fighters that I interviewed who ended up on the front page of Boxing Monthly magazine, something like 6 of them the fights were either called off or they got spanked. And it was like I had a curse. If I'd written an article and they'd hit the front page, the fight wasn't happening or they lost. So I never obviously told the people I was interviewing that, otherwise I would never have got a gig. But yeah, if I'd have interviewed Mayweather or Alberto, it would have put a curse on it, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, just about Larry Holmes there, I mean, I don't think he did himself any favours, because I remember him saying that Rocky Marciano couldn't kiss my jockstrap, or words to that effect. I can't quite remember I think the word jockstrap was in there. So I think, when he did lose and he didn't get that record, I think, yeah, a lot of people probably would have been quite happy about that. I think looking back, Larry would probably agree, not the best choice of words before the Spinks fight, I don't think. So The Rock from his grave must have intervened, I think.
Yeah. It's the sort of thing you do. I think it's kind of the sort of thing you do once you've broken it, really. Like if he'd have broken the record, if he'd have got to 50 and then done that, then I've been like, you know what, that's a bit of me. I'd have loved that. Go on, son. But yeah, to do it beforehand, to do it before, getting past that mark. Yeah, it was a little bit silly, really.
And interestingly, Joe Calzaghe, I think it was 46. I know, correct me, guys, if I'm wrong, his record. But I think he also, out of respect for Marciano, didn't want to get anywhere near 49. So, I do believe that was one of the reasons as well that he called it a day. Probably, there were other reasons, obviously. But I do remember hearing and reading about the respect that he had, that he didn't want to get close to that record. So that was interesting, I thought.
Yeah, and there was obviously the TIE fighter as well that got and I've actually slipped my mind now, and he got I think he even went past it. I think he even went past the 49 mark. I've forgotten his name now, but I always thought it was a little bit. Because of what Chavez Senior did by getting to, what did he get to? It was 82 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I always thought that whole 49-0 thing was a little bit overplayed. I always thought it was spoken about a little bit too much, and and I even thought when Mayweather got to 49 and then got to 50, that I thought it was a little bit of a shame that Rocky Marciano Jr. and the way he kind of was with Mayweather, because I don't think it matters really. I think Marciano's career is his, and I think Mayweather's career is his, and they're two completely different things and completely different fighters. I thought the number thing was a little bit overplayed, to be honest. But who was like your first favourite fighter, Luca?
That's an interesting question. I mean, Kirkland Lang, I just remember for whatever reason, and I once remember actually writing to the Sun newspaper, and there was a column, it was called Ask the Judge, for some reason, and I was just interested because I found out that Kirkland Lang had beaten Roberto Duran, obviously, as everyone kind of, a lot has been spoken about that, and I recently watched, the fight on YouTube, and so I was kind of how the hell did he beat Roberto Duran in America? Wow, what's going on here, kind of thing. And then obviously we remember Lloyd Hunnigan against Don Curry, but so I think probably Kirkland Lang maybe if I had to pick one. I think back in the 80s, I mean, as Paul will remember, there was a lot of Larry Holmes. Obviously he dominated for so many years, and I remember fights against the likes of Randall, Tex Cobb, who I think turned his hand to acting as well, and so it was a lot of Larry Holmes, really, obviously the heavyweight division and others. But yeah, I'd say Kirkland Lang is as good as any. Yeah, bring it on. Yeah, and I think it's great. Obviously just as a sign of respect for him as well. So yeah, I'll say Kirkland Lang.
There's almost a little podcast we had purely on fighters who then went on to pursue professional boxing careers. I mean, so you got Ronald Texas Cobb there. I think he was in The Golden Child actually, and in addition to loads of other movies. If you're a big heavyweight, you tend to play like the nasty guy, or you play the lead guy who's just ever loving sort of soft sort of gentleman. It's usually the bad guy. The other one in Superman 2, the like gigantic guy. It looks a little bit like Huey Fury with the beard, and he was actually a professional boxer as well. I think he fought Muhammad Ali's brother. And then you got Carlos Palomino, great fighter, great world champion, and did loads of acting as well. So there's a fair few of them. There's quite a few who decide they're going to try and be actors afterwards and then collapse fairly quickly because they realise they can't act. So that's a fundamental issue right there, So But yeah, no, all the ones Lucas said spot on. I think for me, it's tough for me to always sort of give that one answer. You know, Muhammad Ali was the one I sort of grew up and I obviously had an affinity with. But you can't go wrong with any one of the four kings.
Of course, yeah.
You know, just choose, hand pick anyone you want of those. Marvin, Sugar Ray, Hearns, or Duran. Anyone will do. But also Carlos Monzon. Can watch his fights all day long. What a hammer of a right hand he had on him. Marcel Cerdan, huge fan of Jack Dempsey, Jack Johnson as well. But even going through to sort of current day, Andre Ward, etc. So it's one of those ones that I'd have to probably sit down and create a top 10 list. But I think I just appreciate a lot of boxers for their different merits, to be honest.
Yes. I mean, the fighters I've always been particularly I've always liked, Cal, are the kind of your southpaw kind of switch hitters, very technical box fighters. So, I'll give you an example. Ronald Winky Wright, for example, one that comes off the top of my head, just very skilled, very slick. Andre Ward, as Paul mentioned. So I think those fighters were the ones that always captivated me because somehow, they just had those silky skills, and just watching them. Kirkland Lang, you could put him in that mix. So yeah, those are the ones I think that always stood out for me.
Yeah, no, you make some interesting points there, and it's I wasn't around for the Four Kings. So although I did watch I was lucky enough to watch the documentaries, and I know Paul's got to watch them now.
No, I watched it, yeah, the whole lot. It's absolutely sensational. Really enjoyed it.
I haven't seen them yet.
I thought I'd seen everything, but I hadn't. There was a lot of there was a few torches shone into a few corners on that. It was absolutely brilliant. Really highly recommend it.
Yeah, it was really, really good, and Showtime did a great job there as well. And the good thing is they got to speak to everybody. They got to speak to pretty much everybody, didn't they? Before, because they made it before. Obviously, Marvin Hagler passed away, which was really good as well. But obviously sad that he passed. But good that he got to be a part of it, and hopefully got to see it as well before he passed as well. Because it was a really, really good watch. But yeah, no, I wasn't around for that. But there was, I suppose, my Four Kings in a way were Cotto, Marquez, Mayweather, and Manny Pacquiao. And the reason I bring those four fighters up, there was a poll actually on Twitter earlier in the week, and I thought it was quite an interesting one. And somebody said who had the better career, Miguel Cotto or Juan Manuel Marquez. I was wondering what you guys thought about that. Because you've got Marquez, who obviously, stopped Manny Pacquiao and won titles at multiple weights, but then you had Cotto that, won titles all the way up to middleweight, the lineal middleweight championship at one point. I was wondering what you guys thought about that. Is that a tough question for you, or do you think it's a piece of piss?
I would go for Marquez. Just for what he achieved, how he achieved it, and also his win over Pacquiao was probably Pacquiao's most definitive loss. The way that he was knocked out there was to say cold was another level. In fact, all the fights they had, Marquez was basically Pacquiao's Ken Norton to Muhammad Ali, and Pacquiao's still fighting now. What is he, 72, 73 years old, next birthday. He's already been claiming pension for a few years and retirement and whatever else. So I've lost count of how many fronts of magazines and articles and newspapers, etc., with the headline of something like "Turning Back the Clocks" or "One More Time" and whatever else have been going on since about 1985. So, can he do it one more time? Errol Spence Jr.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that's an easy one? Marquez and Cotto. Do you think that's a tough one to answer, Luca?
I probably tend to agree with Paul on that one. But like Paul said as well, Manny's had such an incredible career, and who's to say, who knows what might happen against Spence. I mean, obviously you've got to favour Spence big time, but great career, and I'm sure he'll be up for it. But just going back to the Four Kings, if I may, it's hard to actually explain. I mean, I think we must have been around. I think Leonard Hagler was 87, 6th of April 87. and I think it wasn't. Just to give an idea to maybe some of the listeners, they might know, and I'm probably showing my age here, but the fight wasn't even live. It was like it was on ITV the day after. There were highlights.
Right.
I believe the fight was on a Monday, actually, interestingly enough. And I believe in those days you had quite a few fights that were on Mondays, which is kind of unheard of today. But I don't think I can really kind of convey just how huge a fight Leonard Hagler was back then. I mean, honestly, if it had been today, it would be like breaking records like you wouldn't believe. I mean, the likes of DAZN probably couldn't even afford to pay the fighters now. You know, it was like incredible. It really was. And obviously Marvin as well, with, you know, sadly passing away recently as well. But I mean, yeah, wow. You know, that those four guys, I mean, I don't think we'll ever see, you know, that kind of rivalry again, to be perfectly honest. So for me, yeah, sure, Marquez, Pacquiao, modern day greats, everything you want. But for me, compared to the Four Kings, there's no comparison. That's just my biased opinion.
Yeah. No, I get you. They're four, you know, particularly Duran and I'd say Leonard for me. They're two, you know, four kind of all-time greats. You know, and I think out of the four that I mentioned, I think only Mayweather and Pacquiao can kind of claim that sort of level, can even be spoken about on the level of those four guys. The others are great fighters. They have their place. They go in the Hall of Fame, but they're not that kind of all-time great level where, you know, Hagler and Leonard and everyone else is there really. So
I think there's only one fighter I think that we maybe haven't mentioned that probably could have had some fun with the Four Kings. I'm not saying would have beaten them, but I'm saying would have been interesting to chuck in the mix, and it's Canelo.
I was about to ask actually, Luca, because that was going to be my next question. Who do you enjoy watching today? Who's your favourite fighters today to watch?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, you know, like you mentioned Canelo there, and, you know, you've got to give, to be honest, I wasn't a huge fan if I go back a few years, because I didn't really see the technical side so much. Obviously, there was a guy that was, you know, very, very Mexican, very tough. But then obviously, you know, you've got to respect the guy for what he's achieved. So he's definitely grown on me, and he is such a good, complete fighter, really. And I probably didn't see it coming, to be honest, a few years ago. I didn't think he was as good as he's actually turned out to be. So, yeah, I mean, Canelo's Canelo, and the cinnamon is one for sure that's up there for me, yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, Canelo's... I can see where you're coming from there.
Oh, sorry. Can I just say, sorry, Cal? Terence Crawford's my favourite. Sorry. Before I forget, I'm getting distracted with Canelo. For me, Bud Crawford is my number one. And sadly, maybe we'll never see him in those career-defining fights, unfortunately. But yes, sorry, if I had to pick one, give me Terence Crawford. That he's the one for me. Sorry.
Tell.
Yeah, tell.
Bud. Yeah. No, that's absolutely fair enough. I think, yeah, we've spoken at length about Crawford and our frustration with, you know, the kind of the way his career is going. You know, he's 33 years old now. His best win's probably Victor Postol. You know, but I think it's very, very possible that him and Josh Taylor are going to be standing across from each other very, very soon.
Can I just make one more point? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, it's fine.
Sorry, Paul mentioned about another guy that to chuck in the mix with the Four Kings. Someone who I believe was a fighter that absolutely captivated me, but I never managed to see him. And when I was thinking about the England-Italy game and how England are relentless, I was thinking of a boxing analogy, and that's Aaron Pryor. Now, the Hawk, I believe, if you go back in history, was actually meant to fight Leonard at the time. And I think there was a bit of a story that Leonard ducked him and didn't, you know, rightly. I mean, you know, Aaron Pryor was something else if you watch some clips of him. So again, he's another fighter that, yeah, I think would have given the Four Kings a run for their money, big time. Yeah,
that's an interesting point. I always kind of thought that Aaron Pryor was probably a little bit too small for Leonard.
Yeah, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there was talk of a fight with Leonard, maybe at welterweight or light middle. I can't quite remember, Cal. I'd have to sort of look at it again. But I do remember reading about that and reading that Leonard probably ducked him, or let's just say swerved him, because he probably feared what might happen. Maybe I could be wrong. I'd have to check that one again.
And would Sugar Ray Robinson have beaten the Four Kings? There's a question.
Yeah. That's a that is a question.
He had the toolkit to beat all of them, whether it would have happened or not. Because Sugar Ray Robinson was as silky smooth as they went, and he had nice pepper in his punch. He had great footwork, but it all came down to the opponents in front of him, and that was 4 of the best right there. So I think we're almost sort of getting ready to make that imaginary sort of Super 6 here at this point. So. But there we go. Talking of which, World Boxing Super Series season 3 coming up. The ladies cannot wait. Wherever it is, I want to be there for the first fight, and I've already been in touch with the promoter and asked in terms of being there, and he said, "Yep." As and when it happens, which is going to be quite soon, announcements. Then cannot wait for that. But in the meantime, we got the Euros. It just made me think about while sort of going off on tangents. You've got Lyndon Arthur fighting against Davide Ferracci tomorrow, and should be a routine win for Arthur. The guy he's against is I think 15-0, 7 wins, and roughly the same height. I think a year younger, and I think only fought 10 rounds, maybe twice in his whole professional career, the whole 15 fights. That is. Seeing them today wearing the you got Davide wearing the Italian strip, and Lyndon Arthur wearing the England strip. It suddenly gave me flashbacks of when Martin Murray fought against Sergio Martinez in Buenos Aires in 2013, which for the records, everybody knows that Martin Murray won. Forget what the judges said, crooked as hell. Even Martinez afterwards was sort of sheepishly saying, yeah, I won that. And years later sort of still said, yeah, I think I was maybe lucky. But that was one hell of a journey for Martin Murray. He goes over there. He's treated like absolute royalty. The reception he got at the hotel, the airport, everywhere he went out, people were almost throwing rose petals on the floor. But then come fight night, oh my God, it went to absolute shit. The fans turned against him. Bearing in mind, a few days before, he was at a dinner sitting with Martinez's family. He was chatting to Martin was chatting to their mum and dad. Everyone was absolutely good as gold. And then on the actual evening, Martin Murray's dad was sitting there ringside with, I think, the brother and a few other people. And Martin's dad had just bought this new jacket. And the Argentinian fans behind him were spitting so much. At one point, he turned around and his jacket was literally dripping with flob. So he just took it off. And then they've called the security guy and said, get us out of here. And they've seen this cage at the top of the stadium. And they've basically, I think it's the Vélez Stadium, and they've basically get us in there. So that's like the little cage they use for the away fans, and they get us in there. So as they're going up there, one of the lads from Martin's Barmy Army says, why have you guys not got guns? And he said, because if we have guns, then the fans take the gun off us and they shoot us. And it was like, shit. So anyway, then Martin does the ring walk. They're throwing nappies full of shit at him. They're throwing darts. There's all sorts of stuff flying. And then if you actually watch the video to the fight, you'll see at one point Martin gets hit with the most almighty greenie, and it hits the visor of his cap. And I remember when I asked Martin about that, he was like, mate, he says, it didn't faze me at all. He says, I was expecting a lot worse than that. And he just literally wiped it from his face and carried on doing the ring walk to Bob Marley's Don't Worry. And that was it. And then they had the fight, and they got escorted. They literally closed down the motorway to get him back to the airport, and that was it. And then after the fight was done, and decision's done, and Martin's back at the hotel. He meets Martinez in the morning. We're all friends again, and the whole of Argentina loves Martin again. And they're at the airport, and they're giving him the VIP for everything. So. I think in terms of two fighters wearing their opposing football strips, you're going to have to look quite sort of far and wide to get a reception that hot and cold for any boxer.
Yeah. Do you know what? Other than the spitting and the darts, I actually quite like that. I'm not a fan of the spitting. I just don't think it's gentlemanly. But you know what? I quite like that. You're coming to fight our champion on our patch. We are going to make your life hell. We'll, and then afterwards we're all friends again. We're all gentlemen again. But I think for those, for that hour or whatever, we're going to treat you like the scum of the earth. And I absolutely rate that. And there's been a lot of that kind of conversation around the football recently, with the booing of the anthems and all of that sort of stuff. And this is football. In this case, this is boxing. We're not. This isn't. rugby. We're all sat together being friends and drinking pints of Guinness or going to the cricket where they all pass the fucking cheese board. No, this is
prawn sandwiches.
This isn't that. You're coming to our manor to try and take our title from our champion. We are going to fucking give you hell. And I actually rate it, and it's the same. It's the same with the football as well.
It's like in Turkey, Galatasaray, you see those banners, welcome to hell. Now, I'm not saying maybe like Alan Mint or Marvin Hagler, not quite to that extreme, with, chairs and everything like that. But yes, I agree. You've got to make it hostile for sure, of course. Some countries are particularly good at it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point actually, because for those of you at home that haven't realised yet, there's no real clear running order for this podcast this week because there's just not much going on, and there wasn't much that went on last weekend either. Chris Colbert fought, but whatever. We're just talking about random shit, to be honest, and stick around. But it just makes you think about some of the more hostile atmospheres around boxing, and I thought I was going to get that when I went to Belfast to watch Carl Frampton box. I thought, this would be a bit lively, but it wasn't. Everybody was bloody lovely in Belfast. Everybody was so nice. They sang Sweet Caroline the right way, like they proper got into it.
Oh, can I just mention about that? But while we're on the Sweet Caroline thing, the last few days, Sweet Caroline suddenly becomes the anthem to sing at Wembley. And they're talking about it in the news. This is now the tune to pick everyone up. I'm thinking, is everyone around Boxdale? No one on Twitter was making any fuss at all about this because Sweet Caroline has been played around the O2 and everywhere else for about a decade. And it's always been just as you're getting ready for the main event, you get Buffer in the middle of the in the middle of the ring there, actually acting as the maestro, conducting everyone to sing along with it. So. It's. I think football has stolen boxing's anthem.
Do you hate it now, Paul?
I just think there's some recognition that needs to be given to the to the square ring, and I just feel that boxing's being undermined by the Euros at the moment. It's just too much money in the sport. I think that's what it is fundamentally, and as a result, I reckon they've probably bought the franchise to Neil Diamond. They might have even bought Neil Diamond. That's how much money there is in football.
But I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's not really. Do you know what? I've always quite hated it because I've kind of associated it with the people that go to boxing and then stay in the bar until the main event. Like I've always just associated it with that kind of that group of casuals. It's kind of a dirty word in boxing, is it? The casual, the guys that go to the Anthony Joshua fights in their loafers and chino and short chinos, salmon chinos, and I've always just thought, I've always kind of not liked it. But seeing the England team last night singing it with the fans, actually really quite enjoyed that. So I've come full circle with it, and I enjoyed it in Belfast as well when I went to see Carl Frampton against it was Garcia, I believe. I've
got to say, I in terms of sort of ring receptions, and this one wasn't even trying to make it hostile. It was just pure noise and primal instinct that overtook the stadium. I saw Mikhail Kessler fighting against Alan Green for his kind of comeback fight after he had to pull out the Super 6 because of injury. And he fought Alan Green at light heavy, albeit Alan Green was struggling to get to light heavy. And Mikhail Kessler entered the ring, I think, about 12 stone 2, sort of natural super middle. And he got knocked down in the first round, and then he came back and he knocked Alan Green out for about 2 minutes with an almighty left hook. But it was the build-up, and the song "The Viking Warrior" is played every time Mikhail Kessler walks into the ring. When that happened, it was at the Parken Stadium. There's about 50,000 people in there. Everyone's smoking, literally like a plume of smoke all over the place. It looked like a Sherlock Holmes movie from the 1950s. And the lights went up, the noise started, and then it was the Viking Warrior started off, and he makes the ring walk. The whole place absolutely exploded. Whoever you were supporting at that point, you suddenly became a Mikhail Kessler fan. And if I was ever reincarnated into be a professional boxer, I'd want that sort of reception, literally the reception of a nation behind me with my own bespoke music to go to as well. That was good. I think he had that tune every time he walked into the ring. Some fighters have always had it, Enzo Maccarinelli, Tom Petty, Can't Back Down. Some people have always stuck with a certain tune, but you get quite a few these days who are looking to have a rapper walk them in, and it's a different one the time after that, etc. Kind of steers of their identity. Stick with the tune, make sure it means something, and you'll automatically go in a slipstream of that natural hostility we're talking about there that adds value, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's actually an interesting point around, hostile. Can you think of any, Luca, of any either being there in person or watching on the TV, like hostile kind of atmosphere?
Yeah. One of them that I really like. I mean, obviously, in Britain at the moment, we know Belfast, as you mentioned, Cal. But one that always kind of, got me was Lewis Ritson in Newcastle. There was that particular sound, the ooh, 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 that kind of very, very intimidating. And obviously, I really, really, really like that. And I can imagine for the away fighter it being, super, super intimidating. So that's one that I remember thinking, that's some atmosphere. I wouldn't fancy stepping into the ring in Newcastle with 8,000 Geordies cheering on Ritson. So I remember that particularly. So that's one that sticks in the mind.
Something that sticks in my mind about Newcastle was there was a disco ship called Tuxedo Royale just by the Quays Bridge there, and I'd had a few beers. I went with a couple of mates of mine. It's back in, it's got to be 20 years ago. And it's got a revolving dance floor on it. And as I said, I had a few beers. And I went flying off the revolving dance floor and ended up in someone's table in the middle of a load of beer glasses. And thankfully, they found it very funny, picked me up and even bought me a pint. So I think anywhere else, I'd have probably pissed off a few people. But there we go. Steer clear of revolving dance floors, guys, if you've had a few beers. Good advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I heard you left with 3 women as well after that, Paul.
Only 3, right? Yeah, you got the soft. That must have been the broadsheet version. The tabloids, I think, is 7 or 8. So yeah.
I think it's interesting you were talking about Mike Murray and Sergio Martins, because I think one of the best atmospheres I've been in was with an Argentinian fighter as well, actually, and it was at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. May 2014, May of 2014, when Floyd Mayweather boxed Marcos Maidana in their first fight, which was a fucking good fight. Tony Weeks let a lot go, but it made it for more of a fun fight. But I'll never forget being there, and Maidana got off to a really good start. And the Argentinian fans, it was Cinco de Mayo weekend. Oh no, that's a Mexican holiday, but the Argentinians were all there in full force, and they were chanting "Ole, ole, 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 Chino, Chino," and it was just reverberating around the arena. And I thought to myself, I've travelled all this way to see my favourite boxer lose to Marcos Maidana. I can't handle this. It was really quite scary up until about round 5, and then Floyd did what Floyd does. But that was one of the best atmospheres I've been in. Is there a again, we was thinking about the football earlier on, and we were talking about who we wanted to win, and all of that kind of thing. Paul, you was talking about wanting Italy to win, and I'll never forgive you for that, but we'll go past it for now.
For everyone listening, Callum's actually wearing an Italian shirt as we speak here, and he's even got his face painted in the Italian flag. So don't listen to this nonsense. Apparently he's even got Italian underwear on. There's no limits to this. We can't see from the waist down, but I bet you we're talking Italian socks.
Paul, I'll go even further. Like Robin Reed, he's got Italian heritage.
Oh yeah. I've got to say that sort of story quickly. Interviewed Robin Reed a few years ago, and because he's got that sort of slick back hair, and when he went to Italy to fight, who was it, Nardiello, I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And so he's at the press conference there, and then one of the because I think he's half Jamaican, half English, Robin Reed, but with the combo. He certainly passes for an Italian-looking guy with sort of the olive skin and a slick back hair, and obviously the good looks. But he's at the press conference, and someone says to him, "Is it true that you've got Italian blood?" And he went, "Right." So I think his trainer actually leant across and went, "Robin, just say yes, mate. Say yes. You'll be really popular here. We need the crowd on our side." So Robin's gone, "Yeah, that's right. I've got an Italian father." And he said, "Where is he?" And he's like, and he made up this bullshit story. I haven't seen him for years, and this, that, and the other. The next day, Robin, I think it's like the day before the fight. The next thing, Robin gets a call. He's in his room, and the bloke at reception says, "Hi." He said, "Your dad's downstairs." And he's like, "What?" So his dad's, sort of Jamaican, and apart from that, I don't think he's ever sort of met him before. And he goes, "Yeah, he's downstairs." So what happened was some old codger listened to the to the press conference and decided he's going to cash in on Robin Reid because he's made a few quid and he's getting paid quite well for this. It's a world title fight, and so Robin comes downstairs and there's this old Italian guy, definitely not Jamaican, and he's gone over to him and he's gone, "Son," and he's gone, "What?" So who the hell are you? So, anyway, thankfully there was no press around to sort of pick up on it, but that kind of slightly backfired on Robin at the time. But he's I'll tell you what, Robin Reid, you get him on his own, he is hilarious. He's got a story for everything, and even like the '92 Olympics as well, he gives some cracking stories there. He's a good lad. He does a lot for charity as well, which a lot of people don't know. It goes under the radar. But there we go, another little Italian sidestep,
I love it.
There were some great rivalries. We talk about England, Italy on Sunday, and that era, Paul, as you remember, well, Callum as well. You had the likes of Vincenzo Nardiello, who was a little bit of a joker, as we know, and then you had, Silvio Branco, then you had Mauro Galvano against Nigel Benn. There was a lot of Italian-British fights back then, and also another thing, talking about football back then, there was the what was it called? The Anglo-Italian Championship. Do you remember when Serie B sides played the Championship sides then? So every year, like in Wembley, there was this big tournament and there were big punch-ups. I remember reading some horrific stories, and it was like the likes of Cremonese playing against Norwich, for example. So it was like Serie B in Italy against what is now the Championship, and it was called the Anglo-Italian Championship. And every year, I remember reading about it, obviously, and reading some stories. So there's a lot of history between England and Italy, football, boxing, that maybe, I don't know, the listeners maybe might not be aware of. But obviously and also Joe Calzaghe, by the way, would always wear the Italian flag with the Welsh flag on his trunks as well, as a nod to his heritage as well.
I think it's also worth mentioning there was a certain namesake of yours, Gianfranco Rosi, who was a European super welterweight champion, then went on to become WBC world super welterweight champion. But the reason why I mentioned about the European one is because he beat Britain's very own Chris Pyatt. So there we go, another Anglo-Italian encounter there.
And then he got knocked out by Lloyd Honeyghan, didn't he?
He got knocked out before the Chris Pyatt fight, because when he fought against Honeyghan, he was I think fighting at the lighter weight. And then he moved up from welter up to there. But when he fought against Honeyghan, Jimmy Tibbs was actually in the corner. And Italy were doing their very best to try and keep Gianfranco Rosi in the fight. But in the words, if you watch that fight, Lloyd Honeyghan throws an overhand right, which hits Rosi so hard, he's out for about a minute. And the referee's trying to sort of like give him, but never mind 10 seconds, trying to give him about 10 minutes. But in the words of Jimmy, he's like, could have given him 10 hours. He still wasn't going to get up. And it was one of those ones that there were some great encounters back in the 80s and 90s in there. And everyone likes to pull a bit of their heritage as well. And, all adds into this sort of, the melting pot. England and Italy have had some great rivalries over the years over a number of sports. So, Now with Sunday sort of culminating here, everything's kind of being unearthed again and surfaced to add a little bit more spice to the melting pot. And you know what? That's what we love, is a bit of spice. And we're all about the sport, boxing specifically for the poddy. But listen, Sunday's great. It's been the springboard for this podcast, and I think we've managed to discuss some good stuff.
Yeah, we've got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to talk about we're approaching the 50-minute mark, and I thought we'd quickly just talk about some current things. The first thing was we spoke about a lot of niche stuff today, but I just wanted to talk about something else not so niche. It was just the Boxing News and their article around that they're no longer going to recognise the sanctioning bodies world titles. I don't know if you've seen that, what you thought of it, what's kind of your reaction to that.
So the TTR is a transnational rankings.
It's a TBRB, isn't it?
That's it. I should know. It's run by Springs Toledo, and
Transnational Boxing Rankings Board.
There we go. I would believe it or not, I was actually part of it for about 2 years. I just couldn't commit the time and whatever else. I'm going back about 5-6 years ago now. And Springs has got in touch, and I think what they do is great. And trying to basically work out who's the best fighter in each division and work out the merit stat, I think is exactly what's needed, because every sanctioning body is going to decide on who they want there because of financial traction. At the end of the day, because of their own visibility selfishly over the other sanctioning bodies, and it's just become an absolute farce with the WBA, with all the different world titles they have, the interims, etc. The WBC, which used to be the most respected, everyone was talking about having the green belt, that was the one to have, has become just as farcical. Every time there's a fight with Canelo or Mayweather, another belt was suddenly invented. I think it's a move in the right direction. In the ideal world, one belt, one champion, lovely. And that's why I'm a massive, massive lover of the World Boxing Super Series, because forget about the titles. When the best take on the best, you know who's the best in the division. Forget about the trinkets around the waist.
Yeah, what did you think about that, Luca, about boxing news, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, I can only just echo what Paul's just said there. I can't really add much more to that than that. Yeah, bring back the days of the one weight, one champion, and get rid of all these alphabet soups and all the rest of it, to be perfectly honest. So, I mean, maybe that's a little bit wishful thinking, but yeah, I think, as Paul said, it's a big step in the right direction. I think it's high time. I mean, it's been going on too much. It's just all about money, and it's not really for the boxing fans. It's more lacing the pockets of the governing bodies, as we know only too well. So, yeah, whether it'll change, I don't know, but hopefully, something has to give, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me, really. I really liked the editorial that Matt Christie did for the kind of the announcement that they wasn't going to, because he kind of took everybody to task. He didn't just take the sanctioning bodies to task. He also spoke about the promoters and the fighters, because they're the ones really that are keeping these, keeping the sanctioning bodies in silk pajamas, aren't they? Eddie Hearn will put an interim title on for one of his fights, or an international or intercontinental, and it's not just Eddie, it's Frank Warren, it's Bob Arum, it's every promoter, IBO internationals or WBC Silver Junior, whatever the fuck, Daniel Dubois, all the belts. There's no one that's not really guilty of this whole kind of farce, really. And I kind of respected Matt for that he didn't just single out the 4 sanctioning bodies. I enjoyed back in the day seeing pictures of Roy Jones covered in belts, because he loved to collect the belts. The only one he didn't want was the lineal light heavyweight title. He avoided that one for a little while. He didn't want the champ.
Oh, don't tell Luke Williams that. He will flip.
Luke hasn't been on the pod in a while, and he's too busy.
We can slag off the lineal left, right, and centre. Then there is no lineal.
I'm all about the lineage, to be honest with you, Paul. I just felt that Roy Jones kind of avoided the lineal champion at the time. I'm all about the lineage, I quite enjoy, that was my point. My point was, you see Roy Jones covered in belts. I actually quite enjoy that kind of thing, and I don't mind there being 4 main world titles, because it kind of just looks good, and it gives. And if you lose one, you find if you can't beat fighter A, well, do you know what? I might be able to beat fighter B, because his style kind of works for me, and so you've got a way back in. But what I can't get along with is that the sanctioning bodies don't encourage unification. In fact, they do the opposite. They don't want you to unify. If you win a WBA world title, you are kicked out of the WBC's rankings, and vice versa. And that's the same goes with the IBF. If you win the IBF title, you're kicked out of the WBC rankings. They discourage unification, and that's what we should want. And what you guys spoke about just before was one champion. And that's completely right. And we have that in Josh Taylor. We did have that for 5 minutes in Teofimo Lopez. We had that in Alexander Usyk. So we've had that. There's also been discussion recently around undisputed, and the term undisputed, because it kind of gives, for me, it gives the sanctioning bodies more credit than actually they deserve. And that's why I am a fan of the lineage, Paul, because the man is the man. The man, whoever beat the man is the man, or in women's boxing, whoever beat the woman is the woman. So I kind of, I think it's gone too far now, and I respect Boxing News for the stance they've taken. I don't think it'll make a jot of difference. I don't think it'll make a little bit of difference, because I think Eddie Hearn or Frank Warren and everybody else will still pay the WBA for an interim title. They will still pay the sanctioning fees, and that's the real problem. Until fighters and promoters, I just want to fight the actual champion. These belts aren't going anywhere.
I think we also need to remember as well that Boxing News is one of the big magazines out there on boxing. The only other one really is Ring Magazine, and obviously they have their own belts, so they can continue to sing by their own hymn sheet to a better extent, and stand totally separate to all those discussions, because they work under their own sort of banner. But I think, in terms of, how can I put it, a bit of a cleaning exercise, I think it's a step in the right direction. I do agree that things will continue regardless for a long time anyway, but it's sending out a good warning shot there anyway. I think there needs to be more tournaments just to define fighters, and that if the money is available in those tournaments to reflect the worth of the best fighting the best, people won't give two shits if they're fighting for the TK Maxx belt, the WH Smith belt, or the WBC belt. It's all to do at the end of the day with the cash in the hand, and that's why they're in the game. They're really not there for some worthless trinket around their waist.
You're right. Boxers are there for the money. They like a belt. They do like a belt. But I remember Sean Dodd. He was close to tears when he won that WBC International. He won the genuinely. He won the WBC International. I remember him being sat on the steps at Goodison Park on the Bellew undercard. He was close to tears. Oh, this means everything to me. It does. It means everything to these fighters. That I think it's just a signal, like you said, of that recognition of, like, I've done something. I've achieved something. In the grand scheme of the sport, a WBC International is fucking worthless. But to him, it meant everything. And so
I totally get that. Yeah. Of when you start in a sport, or even when you're a kid and you get a medal for playing a game of football, even if you've been on the losing side, you get away and you'll sleep with it on and whatever else. You genuinely get bowled over by that. But I think by the time you start to get to sort of world title status, and you've been a world champion for a while, and you're collecting all the different belts, the term unification. Well, the second you've got two belts together, you've unified. But there can also be another unified champion who's got two, if not more, belts. So again, it becomes messy. So, it all comes down to sort of personal achievement, who you fought against, and I think that the definition of your spot in time, and whether or not you'll get sort of Hall of Fame status, is not going to be how big your cabinet is. It's going to be the fights you're in and who you beat. That's where I think you're going to sort of cement yourself in history. And over the years, the number of belts out there, as we said before, I think that there's quite a few sort of WBA regular titles that are not worth the equivalent of the British title for many of our fighters at the moment. So let's see what happens. Nice housekeeping exercise there being pushed forward by Boxing News, and I hope it's taken on board by the boxing community.
I mean, the other thing quickly is these belts give these fighters bargaining power, don't they? So basically, you're loyal, you get the WBC International, will bump you up the rankings. And then what happens is that you get really good European champions that get sidestepped, they get overlooked, so they don't get world title shots. So Belgian, Spanish, Italian fighters were very, very good, solid. Once upon a time, as we know, you'd win the British title, then it's the European, then it's the world. There was like a hierarchy of fights. So what these belts do is that they artificially inflate fighters so that they suddenly WBO rank 2, and hang on a minute, they've had 12 fights, won a Southern Area Mickey Mouse. Well, I don't want to say Southern Area is a Mickey Mouse belt, but they've won a pretty insignificant belt by world standards, and then here they are fighting for the world title, and then more often than not, they're going to get beaten. So you're also damaging the health of a fighter because you're artificially inflating that fighter, giving him a world title shot. And often it could lead to, pretty significant kind of losses, and as I said, dangerous for the health of the fighter as well. So that's kind of another issue that I have. You've got to prove yourself. It takes time. Josh Taylor, I guess, is a bit of an anomaly because he's only had, I don't know, less than 20 fights, hasn't he? And look at him now on top of the world. So, obviously he deserves it and he's of that caliber and class. But in most cases, I think he's an exception to the rule, really, Josh Taylor, I think.
He's been matched brilliant and he's been matched tough. Pretty
Yeah.
much throughout his career, and I think that's a really good point you make, Luca. We're going to wrap up in a minute. Let's quickly talk about the 154-pound division, because I know I've just slagged off the term undisputed, but we do have an undisputed title fight next weekend, I believe it is. And it's Jermell Charlo against Brian Castano for all 4 of the Alphabet Soup belts, the Lineage as well, Ring Magazine, the lot. Are we expecting Jermell to win that, Paul, win that comfortably?
Yeah, absolutely. Brian Carlos Castano, he's 18 fights, 1 draw. He's won everything, but he's won nothing.
Yeah.
And he's obviously, he's got the WBO World Superweight, welterweight title. So Jermell Charlo's looking to add that to his cabinet. But I'm not expecting an electrifying fight. I think we discussed last time, with Jermell Charlo that. He lost his power when he came up, and he's, I don't know, he does everything technically perfectly, Charlo, and always delivers, but he's not someone I want to get up in the middle of the night and watch, and that'll be a YouTube job the day after. But yeah, it should be an easy walkover for him against the Argentinian.
I think you're talking about Jamal. Because he moved up to 160 and lost all his power, but Jermell is knocking motherfuckers out.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, no, actually, he's knocked his last 3 opponents out.
I was in Brooklyn when he knocked out Erickson Lubin in a round.
So the only fight he has lost was against Tony Harrison, and
that was And
then he came back and knocked him out two fights later. So it should just be a walkover against Castano. Like I said, he's not of any substance. It's like, Lyndon Arthur tomorrow, he's fighting an unbeaten fighter, but it just looks good on paper. You pick an unbeaten fighter who's beaten nobody, and you put a loss on their record. It's not the first time it happened. It's not the last. It's just that lovely matchmaking, and people can't argue with the fact when you put an unbeaten fighter in front of someone, they're like, it's a bona fide in person, which is bullshit. It's really not. So, but there we go. And the only other thing I was going to say, just to add on to your final sort of comment in there, is the whole Tyson Fury thing, I think, which is sort of being released this evening about the COVID in the camp, isn't there?
Yeah, apparently so. There is a COVID case or a couple of COVID cases in Tyson Fury's camp, and there's a little bit of concern that the fight might get postponed. There was even some talk online about that Fury has until September to fight Wilder, and that's when the whole contract kind of goes out the window after that. Did you see about that, Luca? Did you see that news online?
Yeah, I did hear a little something about that. Yeah, but it seems to be everywhere now, doesn't it? Football, everyone, there seems to be COVID. I wouldn't be surprised if for the England-Italy game some COVID case kind of comes up in the news. So yeah, obviously a bit of a blow if the fight gets postponed as a result. So let's hope that it doesn't get so far. Get that far.
Are you saying, Cal, that it might be a phantom coronavirus case in the Fury camp so that the fight doesn't have to happen?
No, not at all.
Is there a possibility?
There's a possibility. I guess there's a possibility. It's 2 months, isn't it? If that's the case, if that is true, I don't know if it is true that's the contract, that the fight has to happen by September or it's void. I don't know if that is true. It's just something I saw online. Then I get it, but I actually think this suits Fury. I think he does want to. I think he wants to fight Wilder. I think he wants this cash out before the Joshua cash out. I think he wants double bubble. I think he wants the money from both. I don't think he wants to fight Joshua yet. I'm not saying he's scared of Joshua. I don't think that at all. I rarely think fighters are scared of other fighters. I don't think that's in their nature, really.
What I don't understand is that the fight is on the 24th, so we're looking a good couple of weeks away here. And in terms of doing tests, etc., if the entire camp is having tests and then they will go into quarantine for the next 10 days, that still brings them up to the 18th of July. and there's still 6 days to go before the actual fight itself. So if they were all to isolate and then go out 6 days before, give them a few days to shake off a little bit of jet lag. I don't know. It's a risk, I guess, but I don't know.
I actually thought that Bob Arum said the other week that Fury had been vaccinated, because when the Teofimo Lopez fight fell apart against George Gambosos, he was saying, "Oh, it's a disgrace. Lopez hasn't been vaccinated. Fury's been vaccinated. Crawford's been vaccinated." He was talking about how all of his fighters had been vaccinated, but Lopez hadn't because he was with Triller, the Triller network. He was boxing for that. So I would actually think that Fury had been vaccinated. But if there's COVID in the camp, or Fury's only had one jab or whatever, then it'll get pushed back. But I still think the fight happens. I don't think there's going to be a problem with this fight at all. I don't see it. And one last thing, but just before we go, just because I was talking about the 154-pound division, what do we think about Tim Zhu, who boxed yesterday?
Oof. Big shadow to come out from, isn't it? From his dad, but seems to be doing well. It seems got good power. All comes down to the competition he's currently fighting. I mean, the Jeff Horn win, it was almost, again, it was like the fighter who beat the fighter, because of Pacquiao, the fighter against when he beat Pacquiao, when was it, 2017? So the notoriety of that, say that I beat that person. I think Tim Zhu's got a lot of potential, doing well. You can't knock him so far for what he's done. Needs to be in those more defining fights. But I like the kid. He's got a lot of grit to him, and he's very, very popular in his country, very patriotic. So, and he's got a great mentor by way of his dad to follow as well. So, I look forward to seeing the kid out again. I like him.
Yeah, it's interesting with Campbell Hatton as well. Obviously, Hatton, Zhu, and obviously different stages of their careers, obviously. But obviously, Tim Zhu's had a lot more fights. But yeah, that's an interesting to see how that pans out, how the two sons develop, and who will have the most success. Because Campbell Hatton looks promising as well, doesn't he?
No.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I've just cracked myself up. I don't think he does look promising.
Okay, all right.
So I just, do you know what it is? I can't ever.
Everyone seems to be raving about him. Everything I'm reading, and to be honest, I haven't really seen a lot of him. I'll be honest, but from what I can gather, I mean, obviously he's only had 2 fights. Okay, fair enough. Okay, it's early days, but okay.
I cracked my. I don't think he's going to have a long career. I just, there's a gut feeling. I don't. Yeah, there's something about him. He looked before that first fight. He looked terrified. He looked absolutely terrified. He looked like a nervous wreck, and it was his debut, and a lot of pressure on him. They keep putting him on pay-per-view. It's not like he's boxing at the Camden Centre. He's he's boxing on pay-per-view in front of a lot of people. So I don't blame him for being nervous, but I'm just not sure. I'm not sure.
I guess there's another question here for a future podcast. Colin usually comes out with some cracking questions, and I'm sure he'd be able to dig out something, which is the sons and daughters of world champions, very good world champions, who have then gone on to be better than their dad. Is there many out there? Is there any we can think of? I mean, you've got the likes of Conor Benn as well on the trail. It's big boots to fill by way of Nigel. But for Hatton Jr. to be better than Ricky, he's going to have to go somewhere. That's again, very, very big boots to fill. So can anyone think of any fighters out there who have superseded their father's achievements as a world champion?
It's really actually quite
That's
easy.
A good question, that. I remember the likes of Marvis Frazier, but obviously nowhere near as good as his dad. I think you're right. That's a really good one. I can't think of any, to be honest.
Cal's got one. Go on, Cal.
It's Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Of course, of course.
That's the easiest.
Yeah, of course.
It's hard. If you ignore Floyd, if you discount Floyd because his dad was never a world champion, you've got Shane Mosley Jr. He didn't do great.
We'll talk about
you've got Chavez Jr. He's funny. Yeah. Well, although I think Chavez.
Are we basically saying apart from Floyd Mayweather Jr., there is no other fighters that have been better than their dads who are world champions?
Don't think of off the top of my head.
I'm sure there
there's some.
There's
some
that's a
suggestions.
question for all the listeners to sign off on. That is the one to come forward and bang us some questions for the next poddy.
Absolutely, I like it. It's a good way to sign off.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time, chaps. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Cal, for the invite. Really,
thank you, mate.
If Italy win, neither of you are invited back. Ever. Luca, where can people follow you?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm on Twitter, but I don't have too many followers, to be honest. I'm not, I kind of keep low key, but yeah, they can find me, Luca Rossi 13 on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn if anyone's interested. But listen, follow Paul and yourself, the pod. I think it's a great podcast, Cal, and fantastic. I think you've got a great thing going here, and obviously testament that you've had 15 episodes. So keep up the good work, guys, and always look forward to hearing you guys on the poddy and Paul as well. So real privilege to be on here. Thank you.
And Paul, remind everybody on your possible final appearance where they can follow you.
So if you can usually find me on Crime Watch once every few weeks. I'm sort of making an appearance.
Babe Station,
turning over. Babe Station sometimes. But failing that, it's at Paul Zan on 1972 on Twitter, and obviously the 1972 doesn't denote my year of birth. It's just my IQ. So. And that's it really. So but otherwise follow Callum, follow the podcast, and come on Italia.
It's the number of women he's brought home this year, 72. It's not anything to do with that. And Paul, we will see you again, not just because we love you, but also because England are going to pump Italy hard on Sunday.
May the best team win there, and I hope it's going to be a cracker.
It could be an Aaron Pryor-like England performance. Raheem Sterling could be Aaron Pryor, and Italy could be under the cosh, I fear. Yeah,
it's going to be a cracker. It's going to be a cracker. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.